This is a developing emergency in the Pacific. The Philippines, a nation of 7,000 islands, is once again in the crosshairs of a rapidly intensifying storm. Typhoon Kalmaegi blasted ashore with winds up to 100 mph, tearing apart homes and smashing seawalls as it thundered into the central Visayas region. Overnight, social media lit up with images of cars, underwater rooftops ripped away, and families stranded on the upper floors of flooded houses. More than 350,000 people have been forced to evacuate, many fleeing with nothing but a bag of clothes and their most personal valuables. Airports suspended flights. Ferries were canceled. Entire cities went dark as power grids buckled under the storm's brutal assault. Meteorologists warn that unusually warm ocean temperatures are pushing Kalmaegi to become one of the most dangerous storms of the year. This is no ordinary typhoon. This is a fight for survival.
Kasi na yung makatabang Delta Phase 3. Kasi na yung makatabang Delta Phase 3.
The moment Typhoon Kalmaegi reached the coastline, everything changed. Wind smashed into buildings with the force of a freight train, glass shattering rooftops, twisting into the air like paper. Streets flooded within minutes as torrential rain overwhelmed drainage systems meant for nothing close to this scale. Families in Cebu rushed to higher ground as water poured through windows and climbed staircases like a living force. Lightning illuminated a terrifying sight, waves up to 10 feet high, crashing over seawalls, sweeping away fishing boats that had sheltered there for generations. Airport terminals shut down. Highways collapsed under uprooted trees and overturned trucks. Millions were suddenly plunged into a total blackout. Emergency dispatchers repeated the warning over and over, do not attempt to leave home. The storm is still intensifying. Sirens blared across neighborhoods as responders raced to pull trapped residents out of flooded homes. Some families signaled with phone lights from rooftops, hoping someone would see them in the darkness. Kalmaegi wasn't passing through quietly. It was tearing its way across the Visayas with no sign of slowing down. As Typhoon Kalmaegi continued its rampage, survival came down to split-second decisions. In northern Cebu, families scrambled to their rooftops as floodwaters surged over 6 feet high, trapping cars beneath the surface. Homes that once felt safe became maze-like traps, corridors filled with debris, furniture smashed into doorways, refrigerators floating like rafts. Panicked voices filled the airwaves. We're stuck inside. The water keeps rising. My kids are on top of the cabinet. Please hurry. We can't see the street anymore. Rescue teams launched boats into the darkness, guided only by distant screams and blinking cell phone lights. Strong currents nearly capsized them as they fought through swift water, choking with branches, wires, and shattered walls. Hospitals overflowed with injured survivors. Without stable electricity, nurses stitched wounds by flashlight while doctors manually pumped air for patients who couldn't breathe on their own. Parents whispered comfort into the ears of terrified children, their voices shaking with fear they tried to hide. Behind every rescue, dozens more still waited, praying the storm would not reach them first. Kalmaegi was not only destroying infrastructure, it was pushing human endurance to its limit. Kalmaegi was never just a storm, it was a fuel-loaded machine powered by a warming ocean. Meteorologists tracked sea surface temperatures above 86 degrees Celsius across the Philippine Sea, a critical threshold that injects storms with dangerous amounts of heat and moisture. As Kalmaegi spun closer to land, that heat served as jet fuel, triggering rapid intensification, a phenomenon climate scientists say is becoming far more common worldwide. Strong upper-level winds sculpted the storm into a near-perfect spiral, while a massive wind field stretching nearly 200 miles wide guaranteed destruction far beyond the eye. Even communities 100 miles away from the center were hammered by fierce gusts and unrelenting rain. At the same time, rising sea levels now several inches higher than just decades ago amplified the storm surge. Walls of water up to 10 feet high surged inland, pushing past traditional coastal defenses that once provided security. Experts warn storms like Kalmaegi don't just form, we've created the conditions that make them stronger. This wasn't nature acting alone. This was climate change in motion, and Kalmaegi was its messenger.
Kasi na yung makatabang Delta Phase 3.
When the winds finally eased, the silence that followed was overwhelming. Entire neighborhoods looked as if they had been hit by a wrecking ball. Walls peeled away from houses. Fishing boats ended up in the middle of streets. Mud coated everything from living rooms to schoolyards, leaving behind a thick reminder of the night Kalmaegi arrived. Local officials confirmed the first lives lost. A farmer attempting to secure his animals swept away by a sudden surge. A motorist crushed beneath a fallen tree before he could escape the road. Dozens more were rushed to hospitals, many with injuries from debris flying through the air at highway speeds. But the emotional toll was impossible to count. Parents stood outside their damaged homes holding their kids tight, wondering how long it would take to rebuild or whether they ever truly could. Elderly residents wept over destroyed photographs and heirlooms. Farmers stared in devastation at fields that had been ready for harvest just days ago. Over 150,000 people are now sheltering in crowded evacuation centers, sleeping on mats, waiting for news, praying for calm. Kalmaegi didn't just damage property. It shattered normal life.
Dito, may rescue diri sa phase 3. Maluoy taon mo. Nanami sa rooftop tanan.
As the first light cut through the storm clouds, the response effort roared into motion. More than 250 rescue personnel from the Armed Forces Coast Guard and local emergency units flooded into the hardest-hit communities. Helicopters beat the air above Cebu City, lowering rescue baskets to families who had spent the night trapped on rooftops. On the ground, responders waded through waist-deep water, knocking on windows, calling out for survivors who might still be inside. Rubber boats ferried injured residents to makeshift triage zones, doctors and medics working non-stop, treating cuts, fractures, and shock. Volunteers delivered bottled water, canned food, and blankets, their trucks navigating streets turned into rivers of debris. At ports 3, Dozon de Place and passengers waited for news flights, grounded ferries anchored in violently churning seas. Engineers rushed to assess collapsed bridges and buckled roads, fighting to open even a single route for relief trucks to pass. Inside, crowded evacuation centers. Teachers turned caregivers, comforted terrified children, reassuring them the worst was over, even when aftershocks of thunder still rattled the walls. Kalmaegi stretched every emergency system to the breaking point. But the fight to save lives was only just beginning. Once the floodwaters began to retreat, the true scale of devastation became painfully clear. Streets that once echoed with vendors and children's laughter were now empty corridors of mud and broken glass. Families picked through piles of debris searching for anything left unbroken: a photo frame, a school notebook, a toy their child begged them not to lose. Power outages stretched into multiple days. Cell towers were crippled. Clean drinking water was scarce. And, for many, a painful question lingered: if another storm hits soon, how do we survive again? Scientists warn this is not a random tragedy. Kalmaegi strengthened rapidly over unusually warm waters, a pattern directly tied to a heating climate. Storm surges climbed higher due to rising sea levels. Rainfall intensified faster than infrastructure could handle. What used to be a rare superstorm is now trending closer to the new normal. The Philippines may sit in the path of the Pacific cyclones, but it represents every coastal community facing a hotter planet and stronger storms. Kalmaegi is more than a disaster, it is a global warning. Climate change is no longer in the distant future. It's already rewriting the coastline.
Landa tapan na, oh.
Kalmaegi is gone, but the story isn't over. In Cebu, families sweep mud from their living rooms determined to rebuild brick by brick. Fishermen repair broken boats under the scorching sun, refusing to let the waves claim their livelihood. Children return to classrooms that just days ago sheltered hundreds from the storm. What remains is the strength of a nation that refuses to give up even when nature pushes it to the edge. But this is not just a Philippine problem, it's a global challenge. When oceans heat up, storms evolve. They grow faster, they hit harder, they change the map. Coastal cities from Florida to California, from Manila to Miami, all share the same rising tide. So, here's where we step in. We learn. We prepare. We support. If you believe these stories matter, if you believe resilience deserves recognition, like this video to amplify awareness. Share it so others see what climate change is doing today. Subscribe for more real-world frontline coverage of our planet's fiercest storms. Together, we honor the survivors of Kalmaegi. Together, we help shape a safer tomorrow, before the next storm arrives.